Children's brains form 1 million new neural connections every second in the first years of life. Genes provide a blueprint for how, when, and where neural connections form, but a child's social environment helps determine which connections are built or strengthened over time. Adversity, including poverty, discrimination, and related environmental stressors, can affect the formation of important brain circuits. This is because prolonged or intense exposure to adversity in the absence of adequate support, a condition known as toxic stress, activates a child's stress response past the point where it's adaptive, leading to wear and tear on the developing brain and body. Although some adversity-induced developmental impacts can be repaired, especially through supportive relationship with adults, many of the impacts are long-lasting. Importantly, conditions such as poverty and community disinvestment that foment unmitigated toxic stress in children are the product of policies that have historically benefited white families to the detriment of families of color. Thus, children who experience toxic stress are at risk of not reaching their full potential, at least partly due to unjust societal values and policies. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention defines adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, as a subset of potentially traumatic childhood events that may harm children's sense of security, stability, and bonding with caregivers and others. There is no single comprehensive list of negative experiences that encompasses all ACEs. The original ACEs study in the 1990s asked a large sample of adults about 7 childhood experiences, including psychological, physical, and sexual abuse, as well as exposure in the home to substance abuse, mental illness and suicide, incarceration, or violence. Since then, much research on ACEs has expanded to include physical and emotional neglect, as well as measures of social marginalization that are designed to capture systematic prejudice and bias. In the original ACEs study, and many others since, researchers have found strong associations between exposure to multiple forms of adverse childhood experiences and poor physical and mental health outcomes in adulthood. These include heart disease and depression, and even early death. But negative adversity-induced outcomes can also manifest throughout childhood as learning and behavioral challenges and poor health. New evidence suggests that adversity and stress have intergenerational effects and can influence development in infancy and early childhood. Studies reveal that as early as 18 months of age, children born to women who, through no fault of their own, had experienced multiple adversities in childhood, are more likely to exhibit negative emotional and physical health outcomes. Despite the increased attention to adverse events, there is relatively little research on their prevalence in early childhood, as most research on ACEs and other adverse events examines adults' retrospective reports of their own experiences prior to age 18. Given the wealth of research on child development demonstrating that children's brains are most vulnerable and malleable in their early years, raising awareness about the prevalence of early adversity is critical. A better understanding of the prevalence of adversity and for specific demographic groups can inform research and policy actions to address some of the risks children face on the way to healthy development. Figure 1 shows the distribution of the total number of adverse events, as reported by parents, for children from birth through age 3. Although most children in this age group had not experienced an ACE, 20% had experienced one ACE, and 8% had experienced 2 or more ACEs. As expected, the percentage of children experiencing multiple adversities increases with age, more than doubling between infants younger than 1 year old, 5%, and children aged 2 or older, 11%. As exposure to 4 or more ACEs before age 18 is considered clinically significant, this means that even before entering preschool, more than 1 in 10 children are on a path that could make later school and economic success more difficult. For infants and toddlers, economic hardship is the most common adversity or challenge. About 1 in 5 infants and toddlers live in a family that has struggled to cover basics such as food or housing. This finding is consistent with earlier research demonstrated that families see their incomes drop, while expenses and debt rise following the birth of a child. Parental divorce or separation is the second most common hardship or adversity, with nearly 1 in 10, 9%, of children experiencing this event prior to their 4th birthday. Other ACEs, such as parental incarceration or death, are more rare. It should be noted that although economic hardship is the most common form of adversity, adversity finds children across the economic spectrum. The presence of multiple adversities decreases with family income. However, almost 7% of children in families with incomes at least 400% above the federal poverty line have been exposed to 2 or more ACEs. Figure 3 shows ACEs prevalence by children's race and ethnicity, and reveals that even at this early infant-toddler age, there are significant racial and ethnic inequalities in exposure to adversity. Compared with young white children, 7% of whom experience multiple adversities, the percentage is approximately twice as high for black children, 15%, as well as non-Hispanic other children, 14%, a diverse category including groups that are too small to be analyzed individually. The share of children exposed to one ACE is also significantly higher for Hispanic, Latinx, and black children. Although previous research has shown inequalities in exposure to adversity throughout childhood, this analysis reveals just how early these disparities emerge. Figure 4 reveals that white children experience lower rates of most individual adversities than children from other racial and ethnic groups. Like overall ACE scores, substantial disparities across racial and ethnic groups in exposure to specific adversities are evident, with consistent and robust disparities among white, black, and non-Hispanic other children. Compared with white children, black children experience higher rates of economic hardship, parents' divorce or separation, parental incarceration, and bias or discrimination. Table 1 shows the overall prevalence of adverse events by state, revealing geographic disparities among young children across the country. Compared with the national average, Massachusetts and Pennsylvania have significantly higher shares of children who have not experienced any adverse events, at 82% and 80% versus 71% respectively, whereas Oklahoma and Arizona have significantly higher percentages of young children experiencing multiple adversities, 21% and 15% versus 8% respectively. In California, 23% of infants and toddlers had experienced one ACE, and 5% had experienced 2 or more ACEs. Led by the efforts of Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, a pediatrician, ACEs researcher, and California's first Surgeon General, California is undertaking one of the most aggressive efforts to screen and address ACEs.